Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite St. Louis sports podcast, The Lunatics. I'm Tyler, your host, along with our new friend Joe, former pitching analyst for The Athletic and former pharmacist, along with me and John. John had a work emergency and is not able to join us this evening, so you're going to be stuck with Joe, but if we're all being honest, it's probably better that way anyways. So, we usually kick things off, Joe, and I know this is your first time on the podcast, but I always kick things off with a nice, fun little what I'm drinking. So tonight I found out that drink of choice from Joe when he was in college was the Maker's Mark. So I'm rolling with the special edition Maker's Mark in your honor, buddy.
Thank you. I'm drinking a pretty boring Bud Select, but that's okay.
He's drinking nonetheless. He's getting into the spirit of things, and if that's all we can really ask. So, Joe, why don't you tell people a little bit about your history? I'm just curious, you did write for The Athletic for a while. It's funny, I went back and started looking up and realized I had been reading your articles when you were writing them, not realizing who you were at the time. So tell a little bit about to our audience on why you're more qualified than I am to talk about baseball.
Well, in my present state, and not that I'm inebriated or anything, but in my present state, the fact that I haven't probably been tracking it as deeply as you have, I'm probably not more qualified. But back in the day, maybe we could say that. But even then, there is a little bit of we can challenge that. But what's my story? My story is actually kind of hilarious. So I tore my labrum in high school pitching. I loved pitching. It was one of my favorite things to do. Probably tore it because my sophomore year at SLU, I pitched every single game. I don't think they understood that back then that you can't pitch every single game, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. But I tore my labrum, and I finally got to a point in college where I never got surgery on it because I was never going to be in the big leagues, college, anything. But in college, my shoulder started hurting to a point where I couldn't do like basic tasks. So I got surgery done one summer in between, I think it was after my freshman year of college, so 2009, 2010-ish. And I couldn't do my summer job to start because I was in a sling. But I figured out, and it probably hindered my recovery, but I figured out how I could type on a computer um, in a sling and be able to analyze. Like, it was baseball at the beginning, and then I found a niche of pitching. But I found a way to basically write about pitching, and I created a blog called stlcupofjoe.com. Turned that into a Twitter account, X account, whatever you want to call it now. And primarily it was my mom, my sister, my friends, like reading it just so that I could see at the top because it was on like WordPress or whatever to see how many views that I got. And I was like, oh, 13 views. This is awesome. But then it kept growing. And then it kept growing, and then it kept growing. And then like Eno Saris, who works for or writes for The Athletic now, previously with Fangraphs, one of the smartest guys in all of baseball, in my opinion. He started following this random stlcupofjoe.com articles that I was writing. That's where I met up with Cardinal Gifts, or Cardinal GIFs, however you want to pronounce it, who was able to basically everything that I wrote, like whenever I wrote something, and this was back in the beginning, and my mom had like no idea what I was writing, but she was reading it because she was being a supporting mother. I said, I need to have a visual in here to explain what I just wrote for 2 paragraphs, because my mom's reading the 2 paragraphs, has no idea. But fortunately, I had a guy who before Pitching Ninja ever was a thing, was able to come up with GIFs that created pitch trails and Scopics and all these like cool things. We spent hours upon hours upon hours, like basically figuring out what worked and what didn't. And that eventually led to Viva Alberto's reaching out. Viva Alberto's, as you know, is part of the SB Nation, Vox Media. There's a whole lot going on with that. I'm not even going to touch that right now with their hiring AI to do their articles, all that stuff, whatever. I wrote for Viva Alberto's for a little while, and that's when Eno really got to know me. And he was like, we don't have The Athletic St. Louis at this time, because this was right at the inception of The Athletic. He's like, we have the Athletic, and we talk about baseball, we talk about football, we talk about basketball, and that was really it. They didn't really talk about hockey, soccer. They haven't grown into what they are now, part of the New York Times, basically the sports section of the New York Times. But he's like, I love what you're writing. I want to be able to get you into a place where you're getting seen more. And at that point, Viva Alberto's and SB Nation was going through some stuff. So we, like Craig Edwards, who your last name is Edwards, kind of funny. He left and went to Fangraphs, and Ben Humphrey, he like took over for Craig, and he was going off on his own little thing. So when the Athletic called, I said let's give it a shot. I wrote basically, I was the only one on the site for a little while talking about the Cardinals, writing about the Cardinals, to the point where I was writing more about like all of Major League pitching as well. And then that developed into, as the Athletic caught on a little bit, that developed into the Athletic St. Louis, where I started writing with Bernie Miklasz, Mark Saxon, who's the Blues guy? Jeremy Rutherford.
JR, yeah.
Yeah. And we had like an editor and everything. It was like a real deal thing. Like we had meetings, we went to get food together. It was pretty cool. And I was able to do that for a little while. Then I had a kid who's now 5. I started working a lot harder. And then I said, you know what, this isn't worth it. I love it, but it's not worth it because it was impacting. Because what people read, a 7-minute article, took me hours upon hours upon hours to write, especially when I started introducing the graphics, that like it wasn't worth it in the end to me. Family's most important to me in life. So I ended it, and then the pandemic hit. So even if I didn't end it, I was like a contractor at the time. Well, the Athletic basically dropped all contractors during the pandemic, so I would have been dropped regardless. But I wrote my last article in 2019, and then everyone knows what happened in 2020, and here we are in 2024, and I'm talking to you.
Hey, yeah, I mean, how the mighty have fallen to land on our podcast, but you know, you got to have some fun with it, and I will throw out I think I mentioned it, but in case I didn't, we call it a no bleep podcast. So if curse words slip out, we are marked as explicit on anywhere that you listen to your podcast because we are too lazy to bleep that stuff out. So,
oh man.
Hey, you know what? Welcome back to the show, I guess. So in all of that, I think it's really cool. I mean, you hear JR a lot. I mean, he gets on, John gives me a hard time because all I listen to when I'm driving to and from work is 101 ESPN.
So do I.
And he gives me crap all the time because I'll be like, oh, well, I heard them talking about this. I want your thoughts on the topic they were talking about. And, because we're a podcast that, I think we have 500 or 600 followers, so which means we get, like 100 listens an episode, which, we're not here winning any prizes, but we're having fun doing it, which is really all that matters. But with that, talking about JR, I get to hear JR talk. I mean, the guy's brilliant as far as hockey, super in depth. Enjoyed listening to his stuff, but I agree that family will always come first, which is why, we had a fun stretch. If you go back and look at our podcast, and anybody who follows us semi-regularly will know that there was like a month gap where we put out like one episode where I was finishing up my MBA finally, and John was dealing with a newborn, and it was like, yeah, well, we'll just record some other time.
Yeah. Yeah, newborns take up a lot of time, for sure.
Yeah. So I've, with your expertise, and first I just kind of want your feeling on the Cardinals. So the beginning of the year, I think I had them predicted like 86, 87 wins. Thought they'd compete to make the playoffs, but that's kind of where I felt like they would be. Seeing how they've performed since Mother's Day, but also taking into account that prior to Mother's Day, they were like 9 games below 500. Where do you see this team finishing as far as like, what's your prediction for their record, knowing what you know, and you've got more information than I did at the beginning of the season. So
Well, let's go back to the beginning of the season. So going back to the beginning of the season compared to you with 86 wins, you were more bullish than I was. I was if they would have got to 81 wins after last season, and knowing what they did over the offseason, I would have been like, okay, that was a success compared to last year. I didn't see Goldschmidt, I didn't see Arenado, I didn't see any of them taking steps forward. They're only getting older. I liked the additions and the pitchers. I liked the additions of Sonny Gray, obviously. He was number 2 in the Cy Young in the AL last year. Like, as long as he's able to stay healthy and the contract that they gave him, perfectly okay with that. I liked the addition of Lance Lynn. I liked the addition of Kyle Gibson. Did I think that that was enough to get them above 81 wins? No, I didn't. But I liked that they were doing something that they realized last year, going into last year, that they needed all of their all of their dominoes to fall correctly for it to be a successful year, and they all went like backwards, or they all went haywire, and none of that happened. So it was nice to see that they noticed that they needed to do something. They did something. Was it like the best thing that they possibly could? Is Lance Lynn the best option they could have had, seeing that he's like a 4 and done pitcher now? Maybe not, but they at least noticed it and they at least made an adjustment. So I liked that. So looking back, or fast forwarding to now, June 25th, whenever this airs, it might be June 26th. There was a rain out tonight. That's a little.
Yeah, it was like it'll be. Depends on John. John published these, so if
Okay.
he's got called in for work stuff, it'll be either Wednesday or Thursday when it gets published.
So as of June 25th, they're what? 2 games? Is it 2 games over 500?
2 games, or 3 games.
3 games over 500.
Because the win last night against the Braves, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So 3 games over 500. As you said earlier, they were 9 games under. Then it was largely the Ali Marmol ejection changed the trajectory of the Cardinals season. So would I look at, am I sold on this team? No. They've got Andre Palante as the number 5. There's other options out there, and I don't want to touch it because it's a political topic of who else is out there that they could add. But Andre Palante at your 5. It's only June 25th. Going through September, with Steven Matz having the setback that he had, with the fact that Zach Thompson, Michael McGreevy, none of those guys are at a spot that are going to be able to be a solid 5 for the rest of the year. And if Lance Lynn is only throwing 4 innings, I'd say your 86 is all you're shooting at. So everyone's like, oh, but they had the best record since, what was it, Mother's Day or whatever you said?
Yeah.
Like, sure they do. But when Lance Lynn is throwing 4 innings and your bullpen's having to throw 5 innings every single one of his starts, and then when Sonny Gray is having these 5-inning starts, so your bullpen's having to throw 4 innings, what we're seeing right now with the JoJo Romeros and even the Ryan Helsleys, where they're either struggling or not getting through their outings as efficiently as they were in the beginning of the season. It's not just because it's hotter outside. It's not just because the ball is more lively. It's the fact that the Cardinals have played so many close games to this point that it's taxing, and it's not even July yet. So what is it going to be like on August 25th, when we still have a month and a half of or a month and 10 days of the season left?
Yeah, I think what I struggle with is exactly what you said, right? We might look good now. And it was the reason I thought we might hit 86 is I thought that having the veteran leadership and the veteran pitching would eat up innings at the front half of the season, but I don't have faith that our retirement home of pitchers is going to hold up down August and September, especially in the St. Louis heat. Say what you will, but I mean, we're already in triple-digit heat indexes right now in St. Louis, as you're well aware if you have stepped outside your house recently. And, what is that going to do to your pitching staff? I think it's funny. It's an awkward time to bring up the four and done thing after, Lance Lynn goes 6 2/3 last night, but that's the exception to the rule, not the rule. On the flip side, we do have four pitchers who, we're 4 games from the midway point of the season. We're at 77 games. We're 40 and 37. And, in 4 games, we'll get another start out of at least Sonny Gray, but you're looking at, 80, 90 innings plus somewhere in that 85. I mean, you're on pace to have 4 of your starters pitch, 170 plus innings. And that's usually a recipe for success. The flip side of that is what you said, right? You've got 3 guys in your bullpen that have carried the load. And how do you manage to fix that when we can't win a game by more than 1 or 2 runs, right? Like our run differential is atrocious. Yeah, we have a winning record, but our run differential is like negative 30 something last I looked. And I don't know if that's still where it's at. I think it's like negative 32 or something. And if that's still the case, right, that's not the run differential of a winning team. Now, the flip side, there's that luck factor, right? But you can't count on winning 1-run games every time. And there's been a lot of like flack for when Ollie's gone to Romero or has gone to Kittredge, and the one time that they mess up and they blow the lead, and it's like, why'd he go to them there? And it's like, who else does he? What else? What do you want him to do? Right? These guys aren't going to be perfect. And again, if on our podcast, right, I have vocally said I still don't think that Ollie's the answer at manager for us long term. He's done a lot better this year, but I point to, and you can flat out call me out if you think differently, but he had a really good year his first year, had a really terrible year his second year, and then we give him an extension. To me, the jury's still out at that point, and the differences between first year and this year and last year is his first year he had Skip Schumacher on the bench. Mm-hmm. This year he's got Daniel Descalso on the bench, right? And so those two, I think, is what made the difference as far as helping him along, if that makes sense, as far as having that true major league person to be down there and to help relate to these guys. And again, you saw what Skip Schumacher did with Marlins last year. I can't throw what's going on with the Marlins on Skip this year after they fired their GM and traded away and whatever else. I mean, that's an anomaly, but I wanted Skip to be our manager when they hired Ollie. And so I'm still a little salty about that. I was excited that we brought him in, but knew we weren't going to get to keep him. But to me, I still don't know if Ollie's the answer, but I don't agree with people throwing him under the bus for some of the I mean, he's managed our bullpen as well as he possibly could have this year.
Yeah.
I mean, to win as many games.
Yeah, and
to this point.
Yeah, to this point, it could change in 3 days, and we could immediately throw up the pitchforks and say, let's get rid of him. But yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the Ollie thing, and that actually, so this harkens back to my time where I actually had a little bit of access, I had a little bit of contacts. I knew Ollie. I had insight into Ollie as he was in the minor league organization and working his way up the ranks. And quite honestly, and hopefully he's not listening to this. Hopefully, like, someone with the Cardinals doesn't shut you down for listening to this. But
honest to God, if we are that popular,
yeah. But I had a lot of minor league contacts at the time that basically they didn't have his back because they didn't feel like he had their back. They felt that he had like he knew that he was ticketed to be like a major league manager one day. Like he was on that flight track to be a major league manager, and whatever he was doing was what Mozeliak in the front office wanted. And it wasn't that he always had the back of his players. And that is, I could back that up. Like, I'm not going to share sources, but I can 100% back that up with multiple people in the minor league organization that felt that his vision was to be the major league manager. And to his credit, he is the major league manager. But it was at the, he took advantage, not took advantage, but he didn't have the support of his players in the process. He was looking to the leader. He was basically sucking up in a way to the leader, knowing that there was going to be an opening at the big league level one day. As long as he kept following their philosophy and saying what they wanted to hear, they would promote him through the ranks. And here he is. He was picked as the manager when you wanted to skip Schumacher, who had a bit more of a track record and a bit more of a rapport with the players. And I think this is where I go with these players. So are these types of managers is when things are going well, he looks like he's doing a good job, and the players have his back, and they say all these positive things in the media, and they're like, oh yeah, I got like Arenado and Goldie are always saying all these good things about him. But then when things aren't going well, and he's calling out people for not sprinting around the base paths, and you don't hear a lot from the team. So I think, as is the case with literally anything in sports, winning cures all, and winning hides a lot of the blemishes that one person might have as a leader. And I don't think what the Cardinals are doing right now, even though I joked about it after he got ejected, he got the Cardinals back on their winning ways. Like, I don't it other than he's done a decent job with the bullpen, I'm not so sure what he's done this year to make it is anything that he did to make them 40-37. I think it's just a fact that this roster is better than what it should be.
You're telling me that batting a aging player who's hitting 200 and the 2 and 3 hole didn't help them win games?
No, you're right. That's exactly what I'm telling you. That is exactly. I think it's just the fact that we've got some players like Alec Burleson that are playing really, and Brendan Donovan that have turned it around, that they're just playing
Mason
really well. Yeah, Mason Wynn. Oh my God, what a guy!
God, that guy's he's very quickly becoming my favorite player on the team.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And I mean, I love me some Wilson. Don't get me wrong. And speaking of calling players out, let's not forget the fact that he straight called. I mean, threw Wilson Contreras under the bus last year, and Wilson Contreras is a man of men among men, and was able to work through that. But I don't feel like that was handled appropriately. I think the Tyler O'Neill situation could have been handled behind closed doors. And, is what it is. Now, again, Tyler O'Neill wouldn't be here with us this year either way, so that part doesn't matter. Like, if anybody out there is listening, be like, yeah, if he hadn't done that, we'd still have Tyler. No, we wouldn't.
No.
Scott Boras doesn't like Mozeliak. Mozeliak doesn't like Scott Boras. He wasn't signing here. That's that simple.
So, 2 fun facts. So let's talk one about Wilson Contreras and then one about Scott Boras. So Wilson Contreras, you can check my Twitter. I didn't delete any of them. I did not want Wilson Contreras at all. I've since owned up to my mistake. I do want Wilson Contreras now, but I've left it there. I've deleted tweets before, or posts, whatever they're called now. That one is still there. I support Wilson Contreras. But the fun fact about Wilson Contreras is, and if my wife listens to this, probably not, but if she does, her late grandma went to a Cubs game towards the end of her life, and she was in a wheelchair, and she was on oxygen and all that stuff. And she went with my father-in-law, and they went early to a game. And she was a huge Cubs fan, die-hard Cubs fan. It was after they won the World Series. We knew that her life was coming to an end. She had, like, lung disease, all that stuff. And her dad, Morgan's dad, my wife's dad, knew where the players parked at Wrigley and knew where they walked into the stadium. And he plopped her wheelchair right where they were. All these Cubs players walked by. All these visiting players walked by. Because I think it was against the Brewers. So I think a lot of the people were there, like, locally, didn't have to do a team bus. But every one of them, Wilson Contreras stopped. And Wilson Contreras, got down on one knee, didn't marry her, but got down on one knee, spoke with her and, chatted with her for a good 5 minutes. And albeit, the conversation wasn't great. She was older, she was sick, all that stuff. They were having a conversation, took multiple photos with her, signed all of her tickets, all this stuff, and just created this memory that, like, now that she's gone and like we have pictures of it and we have those tickets, like, he's just such a good dude that, like, they like it just, there's not that many people out there that are of that stardom. Like, he is an all-star catcher that you think of, man, that dude is just a good dude, and Wilson is. So that makes you so more irritated by Ollie's handling of that and the Cardinals' handling of that last year, knowing that this didn't happen to a jerk. This didn't happen to like an AJ Pierzynski when he was young. This happened to a guy that's like known around the league, amongst players and amongst fans and amongst like everyone, that he's just a good dude, and they put him through that last year, and that's just ridiculous. But then the last thing about Scott Boras, did you know that he has a Farm D?
I did not know that Scott Boras was a Farm D.
Yeah, Scott Boras is a pharmacist.
So you're saying we need to reach out to Scott Boras to be his agents under him.
So I already
Look,
tried.
we're pharmacists, and we also like sports.
Yeah, I tried back when I was like trying to get a job as a sixth year out of pharmacy school. Never heard back. So if you want to try again, let me know if you have better luck.
Yeah, I'll send him some of our podcasts, and he's gonna listen and be like, "What the hell is wrong with these guys?" But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be fun at the very least. So when you know, and I think it's, you know, I've always dreamed of, like, you know, John and I've joked, it was like, you know, someday if this podcast ever becomes a big enough thing, you know, maybe we'll get access to some of these players to be able to pick some of their brains and stuff. And you lived that, right? You got to do that a little bit. And I think that is so cool, right? And something that's really exciting. But one of the things that, you know, I'm real intrigued by, so the Cards pitchers, we talked a little bit already about the pitching staff, and pitching is kind of your thing. Mm-hmm. But looking at the pitchers, what signs do you see for, and really Palante, I think, is going to be what he is, right? You're going to get some good starts out of him. You're going to get some bad starts. He's young. He's growing. He's not going to be a reliable starter in the long haul, and that's fine. But out of our other four starters that we have seen a lot of, we got Lynn, we've got Gibson, we have Sonny Gray, excuse me. And you've got, why am I blanking? Miles Michaelis. Yep. So what signs have you seen from those four? It's kind of a two-part question. Do you see from those four that either signs of regression or progression, either getting worse or better as the season goes on, or good or bad signs? And then the second piece is, outside of the constantly stealing bases, what do you see as a difference between Pages and Herrera? That, like, because I felt like when Pages started catching, I saw a big difference in how our pitchers were pitching. Or is it just that the thought of the stealing going away?
So I'm going to answer that second part first. So I think a big part of that is the stealing going away. I think since the inception of PitchCom, and I think if you look at our staff, you look at Sonny Gray, you look at Michaelis, a lot of them call their own pitches as is, or they dictate their own pitches or what they want to do before the game even starts. I'm pretty sure Michaelis has his on his belt. Between Michaelis and Gray, one of them has theirs like on their belt that they're able to like touch, and one of them has it on their glove. And I'm pretty sure if you look closely, like the vast majority of the time, they're calling their own pitches. So it's hard to say that Pedro Pages is doing that. That being said, like doing that in a better way than we were seeing from Ivan Herrera. That being said, I have heard from people that Pedro Pages has been known as being a good pitch caller throughout the minor leagues. However, if you look into the minor leagues and you look into it, specifically the way the Cardinals develop pitchers, and this could be a whole nother podcast for like 6 hours, a lot of these pitchers that are especially getting to AA and AAA, like the pitch calling isn't even like decided by the catcher. Like the coaches and the front office say, this is what our projections see of these pitchers. This is what we're lacking at the big league level. This is how we want them to pitch. Like, there's, for better or worse, there's been some pitchers that have left the organization that have basically said when they were in the minor leagues, and this has been posted on Twitter, posted on X, like, we want you to pitch this way just because this is what we need at the big league level. That's not fair to those pitchers. That's not fair to their development. That's hindered their development in a way. And in another way, it's been hindering the catcher's development, to where maybe what we're seeing out of Ivan Herrera, maybe what we're seeing about catchers that have come before him, not named Yadier Molina, that have never been, like Kisner and all that stuff. Maybe the front office and the coaching staff having these predetermined pitch selections for these pitchers is impacting their ability to call games. So when they get up to the big leagues, they're like, shoot, I don't know. I've never called a game in 3 years. I haven't called a game since high school. All you have to do is look at Andrew Kisner, and Andrew Kisner's not tearing the cover off the ball. He's not doing all that much down in Texas. But if you look at him, he's been one of the best defensive catchers in the league in terms of improvement based off of last year, and all that took was him to leave the organization. What does that tell you about the development of our players as they get closer to the big leagues? But that was a long-winded answer for the second part of your question. But what I'm seeing about the pitching staff in terms of regression, progression, all that stuff, what we're seeing out of Sonny Gray is what we expected out of Sonny Gray. I wouldn't say he's regressing. I wouldn't say he's progressing. We thought he would be a 5 to 6 win pitcher in terms of wins above replacement. That's exactly what we're seeing. Was he going to be the number 2 Cy Young Award winner candidate as he was last year? Maybe, maybe not. His stats right now, like his xFIP, his FIP, all that stuff, maybe he still has room for improvement going forward. I don't know. Even if he doesn't, 2.3 wins above replacement through 14 starts is remarkable from a starting pitcher. I look at Lance Lynn, as we talked earlier about the 4 and done. Like, we didn't expect him. I hated when he was signed and everyone said, oh, he's an innings eater. He never really was that for the Cardinals. He did that a little bit with the White Sox, but he did it with the White Sox who didn't really care. Like, they were just going to run him out there, like, because they didn't expect to win many ball games. So he was pitching in the 6th and the 7th, but they were losing 8-1 or whatever. And was that a fault of him? Probably not. But like, when he was with the Cardinals, his number one complaint that we had about Lance Lynn when he was with the Cardinals was he didn't go deep into ball games. So why is 38-year-old Lance Lynn going to suddenly become the 6 to 7 inning guy? So what we're seeing out of him is fine. He's making his starts. He already had Tommy John like twice, I think. So he'll probably make his starts through the rest of the season. And then Kyle Gibson, he's a unique case. I hated the signing. I thought it was just like a homer signing because he went to Mizzou.
Yep.
Like, they've always
the
targeted him. They've always targeted him when he was available, and it never came through. And then finally, when he's only $11 or $12 million, they're like, oh, we're going to get him, but we're going to have to stretch him out before ball games now. So you talked about that earlier, and the reason I'm ending on Michaelis because that's where I'm like excited about. Gibson, like, he's thrown 14 starts this year, but he missed a start because he couldn't get loose. I don't know about you. I'm 33. There are days that I can't get loose, and I think that's related to my age. So is this just a blip in the radar, or is this gonna keep coming up throughout the rest of the season? Is he gonna get to the 200 innings or 180 innings that he's projected to get, or is he gonna start getting his starts pushed back 3 to 4 days, and he's gonna end up being what we thought he was gonna be? I don't know. So before I get into Michaelis, you say what you have to say about Gray, Lynn, and Gibson, and then I'll get into him.
I think Sonny Gray is a great fit for the Cardinals, and because, as we all know, John Mozeliak likes to sign people who want to be here, and he wanted to be here. But more importantly, I think Sonny Gray has that fire in him, and we've talked about on our podcast a lot that he is a competitor, and we didn't have that competitive edge. That's another thing that I really love about Lance Lynn is Lance Lynn is a fiery competitor. And we've referenced it on this pod before, but I assume you've seen the video of where the guy bunts for a base hit and he struggles to get to the ball because Lance Lynn does not move real well anymore, and then strikes out like the next three guys or whatever. Yeah. And then like the camera zooms in on him walking off the mound, and he's mouthing "fucking pussy, bunts on me," like or whatever it is, like just pissed off the guy's bunting. And all I'm thinking is like, man, we need more teams to try to bunt for a base hit to lead off the inning if that's how he's going to pitch afterwards.
Yeah.
But is that competitive fire, right? Like we lacked that so much last year, right? Our guys were rolling out there, and you got guys like Arenado and Goldie who are, I'm not saying they're not leaders, but they're not vocal leaders. They're not the in-your-face guys. They're not going to do the things. Bringing in guys, and I know we're going to stray a little bit away from pitching here, but like Matt Carpenter, like Lance Lynn, that are not afraid to get in somebody's face and be like, you have to do this. Like, that's just it, right? And part of that I have to put on management, right? Because if the players you have last year couldn't do it, that's where Ollie had to step up. And I don't think he had the respect or the ability to do that where somebody like a Skip Schumacher could have. And I think where this year in those moments, you still have somebody like Daniel Descalso who has a World Series ring and played an important part on that team. Kyle Gibson is the most interesting case for me because I feel like he's pitched really well and actually way better than I expected him to pitch. I expected him to pitch like an old guy who's about to retire, and he hasn't. Up until now, we're seeing the tightness and things. And I had a car accident and messed up my back. I've jacked up both my rotator cuffs. I've done all the injury things already, right? But I expect most of these pro athletes have as well. Maybe not the back injury from a car accident, but you know what I mean? They've had some ridiculous injuries and things. And like you said, I mean, last week, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday night, I slept on my neck funny, and I still have a knot in my right neck that I can't get out. So like, you're getting older, man.
Yeah.
You're going to have knots. And so I do have those same concerns. I had the same thoughts with that as well. You and I had talked a little right before we started recording about Miles Michaelis. So I'm real intrigued to hear, because he did not start off the year well. And he's improved greatly. And really, he started to improve before, but, it kind of continued with that Pages change, which is why, I was looking at Pages and I'm like, I don't see that he's doing a lot different other than not getting stolen on every time a pitch is thrown.
So this is where I'm going to give whoever's still out there writing. I don't know who's still out there writing. I don't have a lot of time to read as many people as I used to.
Katie Woo's out there. We love Katie Woo.
Well, Katie Woo
actually at the Athletic, but
but she won't do this in depth. Well, she might. She could talk to him and get his insight. But here's the problem, and what I learned in my very brief time of having access to players is a lot of times they don't want to tell you what they're doing differently or what they've changed. So you have to just see it in the data, and you just have to see it on video, and you just have to run with it. Or they don't even know what the difference is. So like we've heard about like the Adam Wainwright, he's had like a revelation of he was throwing the curveball differently, or he had the revelation of his stride length was shorter. He made up 800,000 excuses or whatever.
You have my favorite, a good one example, not pitching, but Pujols, right? When he was at the Cardinals and was about to retire and then realized that he changed his leg kick.
Yep. It's crazy. But let's go to Michaelis. So Michaelis, I am the number one Michaelis hater on social media. I've always said like the guy can't miss a bat to save his life. And they signed him $85 million or whatever they signed him for. You're just like, you got to miss more bats than he's missing, and he still isn't. Don't get me wrong. He's not missing. There are games where he'll strike out 8 guys, and you're like, wow, but that's the outlier. He's not doing that regularly. But what we're seeing out of Miles Michaelis right now, particularly in May, particularly throughout June, is his sinker has been remarkable. You look at the data of the sinker. So I'm just going to show you some results data, which I hate results data because it's lazy. But his sinker in March, which was a very small sample size, And in April, the slugging percentage against it was 588 and 423. Okay. Then in May, so we go to May, which is a sample size of 131 basically end of at bat sinkers. So that's how you determine your slugging percentage. You can't get a slugging percentage on a strike 3 sinker you can, but like a strike 2 sinker you can't. But 131, his slug against it is 189. Then throughout June, so far with a sample size of 90, the slug is 114. So these are looking like Dylan Carlson batting averages right now. And these are slugging percentages against his sinker. And you're looking at a sinker and you're like, oh, is he throwing it harder? Is he getting more movement on it? No, he's not throwing it harder. He didn't magically gain a couple miles an hour over the last couple months or whatever for May and June. The ball isn't warmer, so it's moving a little bit more. What he has seen, and it is a noticeable change, shout out to brooksbaseball.net. I didn't know that still existed. That was what I used my whole life. His release point, his vertical release point has dropped by 0.18 feet. So I don't have a calculator on me, but 0.18 feet in May, and it's dropped even from that between May to June 0.13 feet, which is it's a couple inches. So a couple inches on a baseball, that's a lot. So and then you look at where these pitches are ending up and the heat map of these pitches, it is a couple deviations below what it was to start the season. So even if the movement profile isn't much different, which it isn't, the sheer fact that the release point is different is telling me that this is coming to the pitcher in a different path, a different plane than what they've seen before. And it's different from years prior. He's dropping it even more. And typically people are worried about if you're dropping your release point, are you injured? Blah, 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 blah. Miles Mikolas, he's been injured already a bunch of times. He's nearing the end of his contract. Whatever. What we're going to go off of right now are his results. And he's throwing arguably one of the best, most successful results sinker that I've seen in all of baseball. And like I said, if you're having a slug against it in the 180s and the 111s over triple digits amount of pitches, clearly something's happening. And I've looked through release point data for a long time when I used to write. And this is where I need to call up Cardinals GIFs and say, hey, you need to make a GIF of March where the ball's getting lit up, and make a GIF of June, same location, same pitch, and we can see the plane difference and we can see the result difference. And something's clearly happening, and this is where I'd love someone to look into it deeper, because that was a 5 to 10 minute dive that I did before we talked on here, that I'd love to hear what he has to say, what Pedro Pajes has to say, or even what someone who has more time and that is smarter than I am now could just look into that, because something is clearly happening that, he's still not missing bats, but you're not supposed to miss bats with a sinker. You're supposed to induce weak contact, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, and you said he was moving 0.18 feet, right? Initially?
Yeah.
Which is it's just, just over 2 inches. And then he moved it another 0.16.
1.3. So that's another 1.5 inches.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so overall, he's dropped it. Actually, if you add them together, you're looking at really realistically 3 3/4 inches, of difference in the drop.
Yeah. And that's the size of a baseball. That's an average. So there's going to be it's not that that's the meat. That's happening a lot. And at the start of the year, in spring training, he was even higher than that. So something is happening. I don't know if someone talked to him and said, hey, let's just try something different here. But this isn't something that he's done, and I'm just pulling it up. He didn't do it at all last year. He never got this low. What was a good year for Miles Mikolas? Let's find
pick an even year. 22, 18,
okay.
20.
So
You go 22. That's the most recent good year.
Okay, so let's go 22. He's never was this low. So this might be just the new normal of Miles Michaelis, where we're getting to kind of like what we saw towards Adam Wainwright before the last year. Let's go the second to last year when he was still good, where he had to like work with what he had and see what he had that may not have been what he's been used to, and making the most out of what he had. And maybe that's what Miles Michaelis is doing. Maybe this is a blip in the radar, maybe in July, but these are pretty big samples. It's going to jump back up. But if he looks at that and he's seeing on video, because I guarantee you they're not looking at 6.37 feet or whatever. But if he's looking on video and seeing that it's down, and he's seeing, I'm not going to call him dumb, but listen to him talk in the clubhouse sometimes, like throw pitch, soft contact. Like if he's seeing that and seeing how he's throwing the ball, like why wouldn't you try to replicate this through the rest of the season?
So I guess does that give you potential cause for your thoughts of, hey, this could continue, maybe not to the same extent, right? Because obviously as you change something initially, people are going to adjust, but gives you hope that he could be, an efficient pitcher here through the rest of the season.
Yeah, it gives me hope because I look at his sinker last year, and his sinker was abysmal last year. And I look at his sinker Fangraphs. This you're like going to get me back into writing because like Fangraphs has developed so much. 22, which you said an even year, his sinker was okay. 21, an odd year, his sinker was miserable. So maybe he's just got something about even years. I don't know. But like for whatever reason, his sinker is just, it's so exciting to me. And I don't know if like I'm sure you heard on the radio like the time, I think it was it Gibson talking to Palante, where he's like, what are you doing in your bullpens? Like, are you even like focusing on anything? Well, maybe Michaelis had a light bulb moment, one of these bullpens where he threw, because I used to pitch. I pitched in high school, nothing great. But like I remember in the bullpens like throwing certain pitches and being like, man, how did it do that? Like, how can I do that again? Maybe Michaelis had one of those aha moments, and now he's seeing these results, and that gets me, like I said, it gets me excited. I'd love for him to miss more bats like a Sonny Gray or a Lance Lynn when Lance Lynn is on, but I don't think that is the pitcher that Miles Michaelis is. I don't think it certainly isn't the pitcher Miles Michaelis is now. So if he's able to maximize on this weak contact, especially with the infield defense that we have, I mean, keep rolling with it, obviously. Keep rolling with what's working, even though, like I said, that's results-based analysis, which should never be used, but we're going to use it right now.
So I've got a couple more baseball questions, and then I want to pick your brain about a couple other St. Louis sports, because we do cover all St. Louis sports in our podcast. But first, I'm curious, if the Cardinals were to get into the playoffs, right? It's very obvious who your number one is with Sonny Gray. Who do you roll out as your number two?
Well, not if you didn't. Well, Kyle Gibson can't get loose, so it's Miles Michaelis right now. But here's the deal. This is it. I think you don't name a number two starter, and you see how Sonny Gray did in game one. And if you need swings and misses, and you're okay with, especially in the playoffs where home runs are not as frequent, which is Lance Lynn's like number one like hate. Like if Sonny Gray went 7 or 8 in game one, and you're okay with your starter going 4 in game two, which you are if Sonny Gray went 7 or 8 in game one, and you want to have more bats missed, like out of those the remaining 3, Lance Lynn is your guy that you're going to get more swings and misses from. So I've told everyone that'll listen, and in the playoffs, missing bats is so important, and that's what the Cardinals can get through a regular season wins by having batted ball luck or having defensive prowess. But in the playoffs, like a lot of that, your luck runs out, or it's colder and you're not able to get to as many balls as you're usually able to get to. Well, why don't you take that all out of the equation and throw a guy out there that misses bats? So I think, like, to answer your question in a long way is, you don't name a number two. You see how Sonny Gray did in game one, and if he goes long, like we've seen pretty regularly so far this year, you throw out Lance Lynn knowing that you might only get 4 or 5 innings, but you're going to get a lot of swings and misses, hopefully. And you'll rely on your bullpen, your Kittredges, your Romeros, and your Helsleys to nail down the rest of, and your Liberatore a little bit too, to nail down the rest of the bullpen innings.
Yeah. Now I have 2 more questions, so that's always fun.
Shoot.
Yeah, no, that's just how things go, right? You start talking and you start like, oh man, now I have another question about this, or I have another question about that. So first is, for you in this Cardinals team, is another frontline starter, or is a bullpen help, or some sort of bullpen help? What is the higher on the list of what needs for this team if they were to make the playoffs and potentially have a chance? Again, there's a lot of ifs here going on, because we all know, I mean, in my mind, this team is like I said, an 86 win team, which puts them, 5-10 games above 500. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty at this point pushing it, right? Is we're only 3 games above 500. We're looking at, if we're almost halfway, maybe 6 games. So I'm probably going to be off a little bit there on that win total, but it was worth a shot to throw out predictions. I like to be positive.
So I will always, you could ask me this question, you could have a team of 5 1s or 5 2s, and I'll still say you need another starter. Largely because I'm of the belief, and I've been proven wrong before, not often, but I have been proven wrong before, that you can make a good reliever out of a bad starter. Not a bad starter, but a mediocre starter. You can make a good reliever. And I feel like there are some arms down in AAA right now that we've seen in AAA for like 3 years now. And they're probably not going to become a frontline starter. They're probably not going to become a 4 or 5 starter at this point. Go out there and get a 1, because you don't have one internally. I mean, Tink Hence probably is a 2 or a 3, but he's not there this year.
And we had injury issues the last few weeks.
Yeah, so we had injury issues, which kills me because I love his mechanics, which also tells you perfect mechanics won't always prevent the fact that injuries will happen. You're still throwing the ball really, really hard, even with perfect mechanics. But that's another podcast for another 6 hours. So I would say I want another starter. Do I know who that other starter is right now? No. But I think that there are relievers, even in the bullpen right now, that can still step up. I mean, we've seen it with guys that I'd never heard of before this year, where they've stepped up. The Fernandezes, the Kings, well, I've heard of them, but like never thought that they'd be a big league pitcher. The tall guy, what's the tall guy's name?
John King?
No, the guy who had a LinkedIn.
Oh God.
Who he literally gave up on baseball for a little while. I mean, he hasn't been great, but he was up here. He threw a couple good innings. Like, you could replicate that over the course of like August and September, and maybe never hear from them ever again. So, like, I think that they can manufacture a bullpen from what they have right now, and the Kittredge and the Romero and the Helsleys. What I expect, what we're seeing Romero struggle a little bit right now. We're seeing Kittredge struggle a little bit right now. We're seeing Helsley not be perfect right now, and it's because they've thrown a lot of high leverage innings for it only being June 25th. So Are they going to be there for the rest of the year at the level that they're at right now? Probably not. But I think that we're able to bring people in like a Libby, who hasn't been successful as a starter to date, but he's been a decent reliever. Maybe there's a McGreevy down there that he hasn't shown up to be a front end starter that maybe they drafted him as. Maybe we need to make him a reliever for a little bit. I hated what they did with Reyes. I hated what they did with Carlos Martinez, where they brought them up early to relieve. But because I felt like it hindered their development in terms of not being able to throw all their pitches, not being able to hone their mechanics, which led to injury.
Jordan Hicks.
Jordan Hicks, which he's over in San Fran, and everyone's like, "Oh, I want him back now." Like, he's been okay. Like, he hasn't like blown you out of the water.
He had a great start to the year.
Yeah, and people are starting to figure him out a little bit because he doesn't miss as many bats as that type of pitching should. So I think I hated all of that, but the McGreevies, they've been around for a while. Like, we know, like, I'd love for them to surprise me, but I'd love to see them come up and be, like, I don't want them to do that to Cooper Jerpy, or I don't want them to do that to Tink Hence if he becomes healthy, because I think those guys have a future as a starter. But McGreevy, like, we're at that point, we might need to do it and then focus on adding an external starter and run with that.
Yeah, the two that I think about are Michael McGreevy and Cooper Jerpy. At the beginning of the year, I did list Tink Hence as a candidate as like a September call-up to come out of if we needed reinforcements in the bullpen down the stretch. But that was strictly more because of an innings limit issue. If he'd started most of the year, you could call him up and use him out of the bullpen, get him some major league experience. I mean, look at what that major league experience did for Mason Wynn this year, and how, I mean, the guy he looked a little bit lost when he first came up last year, but the guy looks the part. He's playing the part. He's done it all. So who do you see the Cardinals, and I personally, I think this would be a mistake if they do it. Do you see them trading for or trying to go out and get a position player? This was my additional added question here.
I don't see where they would put them. That's the problem. So, like,
my issue is I keep hearing people talk like, oh, they need a right-handed batter, they need this, and I'm like, what are we going to do with that?
Yeah, because like you're eventually, we're gonna hear this probably until September, but eventually Tommy Edman is supposed to come back, and eventually Lars Nootbaar is supposed to come back, and eventually Dylan Carlson's gonna hit the ball more than 65 miles an hour, hopefully. Like,
from the left or right side,
either side, friggin' stand on the plate. I don't care. And
he might have better. He'd get on base more.
Yeah, he'd get hit. That'd be awesome. As long as both of his feet are in like batter's boxes and like whatever his name, Angel Hernandez, sorry, he's gone, could be back there and not notice it. But
DB Buckner.
CB Buckner.
CB Buckner, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, yes, I think there is room for improvement from a position player standpoint, without a doubt. You've talked about Matt Carpenter batting second or Matt Carpenter batting leadoff. Like, improvement is there, but what are you going to do to like a Matt Carpenter who, love him or hate him, like his leadership has played a role in this development of some of these players. Brendan Donovan, if all of and I just use the word if all of these become healthy, like, Brendan Donovan doesn't have an everyday spot, and Brendan Donovan right now has been one of your best players. So you go and add another arm, or another bat. Like, what are you going to do?
I think I have an answer for the Brendan Donovan situation, and that's Brendan Donovan becomes your second baseman and Nolan Gorman's your DH. You put Contreras behind the plate, and that should be your lineup. Come playoff time if your outfield is healthy.
Oh yeah.
Here's my last Cardinals specific ish question, but not really Cardinals specific. Again, we've talked about you mentioned Michael McGreevy. Obviously, you have Gordon Graceffo is the other guy that we talk about a lot. And those two are kind of stuck in that AAA land. What is it that again, you cover the Cardinals and things have changed, but what is it that you would think you're looking for? What things stand out to say, hey, this guy is ready to make the jump to the big leagues as a starter?
So here's the problem with that. And this is the door that I've tried to knock on for a while now, is I don't think within the Cardinals organization, and we saw this with some of the arms we've traded away, I don't think they put these pitchers in a position to be the best pitcher that they can be. They're trying to mold them into what they want them to be. And it's limiting what we're seeing. Like what we saw with Zach Gallen, where he became a great pitcher when he left the organization. Sandy Alcantara, yeah, he's been hurt, but like they were trying to make him a reliever. They didn't even believe him as a starter. It's hard for me to say what I think, what I see in like a pitcher in the minor leagues would make him ready as a starter. What I would like to see is if a pitcher wants to throw three to four pitches. I want the Cardinals to honor that, and I want the Cardinals to work with them in a lab. I want them to work with them with the tech people that they probably aren't hiring. I know they don't have, because I know Sonny Gray asked about a lot of this stuff, and they were like, "Huh? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you have like a tech guy that looks at your biomechanics and looks at your Edgertronic slow-mo," and he's like, "Yeah, it's what I've had for the last 6 years. You guys don't have that." I wish they had that, to where what I envision the St. Louis Cardinals to be is what I envisioned my writing to be like proliferate in, is to where, and yeah, you're like, Joe, you played baseball in high school, whatever. Some of the best minds or whatever out there never played the game that far either. Look at Ollie Marmol, one of the best minds in baseball. So I want to see them to stop trying to pigeonhole these pitchers into what they want them to be, and try to get them to be the best pitcher that they can be, regardless of the fact that they pitch for the Cardinals. So I want a pitcher to have two pitches that go arm side, and I want a pitcher to have two pitches that go glove side, if that's what they think is going to make them the best pitcher, at best chance as a successful big leaguer. Which is what we've seen out of Tink Hence before he got hurt. He's been throwing arm side stuff with the changeup, with the sinker, with the fastball, and then he's throwing breaking balls at the glove side. Like, if we would have done the whole little Kevin Segras skip AAA to go to the big leagues, pitch out of the bullpen, or the Alex Reyes barely pitch in AAA, throw him in the bullpen, they would probably say, "Hey, Tink Hence, I need you to throw fastball and slider," and that's it. And then he pitches in the big leagues and does well as a reliever for a couple years, but then he forgot how to throw that changeup, or he forgot how to throw that sinker. I wish that we got, what I need to see is what I hope to see from Cooper Jerpy here, is where they're throwing 3 to 4 pitches and they're able to execute them in any count and have swing and miss stuff. And you're like, Joe, okay, that you just made life super easy for an analyst. But like, no, I mean, I want them to legitimately be able to throw to their full repertoire before they try to promote them. And I don't think that's too much to ask. And I think that starts at single A. I think it really is adjusted at double A, because once you get up to triple A, you're trying to like prove that you're able to go to the big leagues. So a lot of your development is done at the lower levels, and I feel like they're hampering that a little bit with what they've been doing. Honestly, when is the last? Just tell me explicitly when we had the last Cardinal homegrown, like fully homegrown pitcher that you're like, holy cow, this starter is remarkable.
before he lost it was Michael Waka, but that was 2013.
Yeah, so
And
2013.
injuries are what derailed Waka. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, I was arguing that we should have signed Waka in the offseason this year because at a discount, because he wouldn't have. I mean, he's done well the last few years.
but
I
either way,
wanted him rather.
you've
Either
been
way,
married for as long as it's been since we've last had a starting pitcher in the that we've homegrown and developed. Like that's wholly unacceptable. Um, you don't see that anywhere else. The Royals are over there developing pitchers at the big league level that they home grew and developed. Like when that's happening, like and that's not raising a red flag in your organization, in your $1 billion organization, I don't know what does.
yeah, no, there is, and I've said it before. There's a lack of development within the Cardinals organization because they're so focused on the Cardinal way, and that they know what they're doing. It's sickening in that that's the reason that every time we trade these players away, that other teams see what we don't see, is because we see what we want them to be, not what they are, and the
Yep.
other teams see what they are, and they reinforce that.
Yep.
My last baseball question for you tonight,
It's been
and
a
I hope
lot
you're
of
ready for this
questions.
one. Yeah, I know. And then we're going to try to branch into something for a few minutes, and then I'm going to let you try to go to bed because you and I both have kids and jobs. So,
Yeah.
Are lens crafters missing out on a promotional opportunity by not bringing Angel Hernandez in? Picture this. Angel Hernandez comes in. They get him fitted with glasses. He puts them on and was like, oh my God, have I missed all of those strikes? And then it cuts to his retirement announcement.
Yes, they are missing out on that. The problem is baseball, and I love baseball. You love baseball. Is baseball big enough for that to truly move the needle for lens crafters? Because that again, that's another story for a 6 hour podcast. Like, is baseball doing enough to bring excitement to the game that what the game we love, like will future generations love it to the way we are, or the way that we do? So I know that was a joke. I am able to take a joke. So yes, they are missing out, but at the same time, from a business standpoint, is that going to move the needle? Because is baseball really that? I mean, people are talking about the WNBA like crazy right now. Are they talking about Major League Baseball that much right now?
I think the biggest thing that Major League Baseball is missing out on is that they don't promote their stars in the way the other leagues do. And if until they get to a point where they can do that, that they'll continue to fall behind. I mean, even the NFL, when they step on the field, they're just a bunch of helmets and pads. Off the field, they promote those stars, right?
Yep.
and I think that goes a long way. NBA is probably the best at promoting their stars, as far as I'm concerned. I think MLS actually does a really good job, surprisingly, for as small as they are. But that also helps that they have Messi to promote. So,
Yeah.
best player in the world, even if it's at the end of his career, he's still better than 99 out of 100 players. So,
Yeah.
do what you got to do. All right. So I'm not going to take too long in the other sports, but I know that you are a St. Louis sports fan in general. So first question, we talked about this in a previous episode, but was the Battlehawks not winning the XFL division and making the conference or the league championship game, the XFL or the it's not XFL anymore, it's the UFL championship game? Was that the biggest smack in the face for the UFL?
Yes, it was because they set them up to be there. That obviously by giving them, well, they were able to get the home game, but they set it up. They thought the AJ McCarron was just gonna ride. They were gonna ride the AJ McCarron to it. That being said, I heard from people that even like the turnout, which was abysmal compared to what they were during the regular season, was probably comparable to what it was going to be in either of the people that were in the Birminghams or the San Antonio, right? Comparatively to that, like, was it going to be like, probably a lot of people just went there to drink and like whatever, they already had bought tickets and all that stuff. But yes, it was a slap in the face. I I think with the UFL, I wouldn't be shocked if they don't make it past next year. But I think what they need to do is they need to stop. Yes, they can continue to rely on St. Louis to have their in-person viewers, but they need to get it to a point where it's like a purely a TV product and try to maximize the amount of money that they receive off of the TV. And like, part of that might be giving St. Louis a better looking field, because the field just looks awful watching the games. So they need to like give them
the field is awful.
yeah.
That's why.
So they need to get it like to like have stripes or something, like something that'll be more exciting. Because when I look at that field on the broadcast, it just looks sad. Just very, very sad. And if you're trying to promote any type of product, whether that's like dictionaries or a professional, semi-professional football league, like, you got to make it look good. And that field, when it's on their UFL championship, is the field that they have. That's not looking good. So they've got to do something. And I've loved what they've done with like the Dean Blandinos, where you can like see him do the actual like reviews and see everything that's going on there. And I love what I've seen with the play calls and all that stuff, but they need to really ramp that up, and maybe that'll bring some excitement to the league, because they're not going to get the attendance that they think that they're going to get, or thought that they projected out, unless they bring it to certain markets that are just obsessed with football.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think their entire existence is going to be determined upon their TV deals. So, so here on the podcast, we made a bet. I said I thought the Blues would get 93 points, maybe more if they everything went their way. John said I was crazy, so he set the over-under had us at 92.5 for last season. They finished with 92. I took him on the bet, ended up having to buy him beer over it, which is a whole thing. Do you see the Blues, your gut reaction? We haven't made moves. The draft hasn't happened yet, but knowing that Snuggerud is not coming for next year, but potential for Dvorsky and some other guys to maybe step up and play some big minutes. Do you think the Blues exceed or fall short of their point total of last year?
I listen to a lot of Jamie Rivers, okay? Jamie Rivers is prime for my new job where I drive a lot. Jamie Rivers, he doesn't sound always too positive. He likes he says that he likes the bringing back of the coach and all that stuff, but like Drew Bannister, I'm gonna be glass half full. No, half empty. What's the one where it's like negative?
Half empty.
Half empty. I'm going to be the glass half empty, and I'm going to say no, I don't think that they're going to progress above 92 points next year. I'd love to be wrong. I did that with Wilson Contreras. I did that with Miles Michaelis. So let's do that with the Blues, and hopefully they're better. But like, I just don't see it. And I've seen like the trade articles where they have X amount of cap space where they can do an offer sheet, but then trade away the draft picks for it. And like, it just seems too complex for what I've seen out of Armstrong lately, to be able to get something done. Cause it's gotta be creative. Cause you look at this roster and you look at everyone's like, why are you talking about hockey? Whatever. I went to the only home winner Stanley Cup Finals game with my dad. So that makes me an expert. You look at you look at the roster, and you just look at some of these names, and you're just like, what? Like, that team's gonna be a playoff team? I play fantasy hockey, so like, when I play fantasy hockey, like, none of these Blues players are picked. So that in itself should show that like they're not projected to score a lot of points in fantasy hockey, so their team probably isn't either. And that's what we saw last year, 92 points, and they were 7 points out of a playoff spot, or not that many, but a X amount of points out of a playoff spot. So I'm going to go with less than 92 with the caveat that I hope that they shut me up.
Hey, yeah, we always hope that. You're a good fill-in for John, because John's also a pessimist when it comes to the Blues, which is also why I lost the bet. And that line could not have been set any better at 92.5 for our, and we set that before the season kicked off, which is more impressive, at 92.5. And then they finished at 92 points, like came down to the wire on our bet.
So you
Last game
came
of the
up with
season.
that? That wasn't a
I
Vegas?
told him, no, it wasn't Vegas. John asked me what I thought, because he likes to try to set me up for bets that he thinks he can win, which has worked out in his favor because he's won them. But I'll make some stupid take where I'm like, this is what I feel like in my gut, right?
Yeah.
I think they should be 93 points, and if everything goes right, they can do better. And John's like, so you're saying you'd set the line at 92.5? And I'm like, sure, why not? And he's like, great, I'll take you on that bet. If the 93, 92.5 is the line, if they hit the over, I'll buy you beer. If they hit the under, you buy me beer. And as soon as he said it, I had, buyer's remorse a little bit because I was nervous. But then as the season went on, I was like, towards the late season, I'm like, dude, if we hit 93 points, he has to buy me beer. Like, I am never going to let him live this down. Because he tries to trap me into bets on every episode he can.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but you lost.
Yeah, I did. And it's fine, because I felt like we probably did a better job of setting the line than Vegas on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's impressive. That really is. Vegas has a lot of really smart people and algorithms out there. And if you were able to do it, then maybe you should be reaching out to Scott Boras then.
Maybe we should. We also, what we have that Vegas, some of those guys in Vegas maybe don't have while they're on the clock, is we have bourbon and beer. And
they probably have, let's be honest.
And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, John and I were both quasi-educated people. We both have our doctorates. We both have a master's to go along with them, and we'll pretend like that has something to do with it. But we all know it was the bourbon talking that night. So,
yeah, without a doubt.
All right. I don't know if you follow soccer or not. It's the one sport I haven't had a chance to pick your brain around. St. Louis City had a dream season last year, as we're all aware. John and I were talking, and we actually started the podcast last year because we couldn't stop talking about City and the Cardinals and everything going on. We're like, dude, we've been talking about starting this podcast for like 5 years. Let's just do it. So we finally did it. With that being said, dream season, we had talked a lot that we thought the St. Louis City last year would finish somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, either bottom of the playoffs or just missing out. Looking at the roster, looking at the identity, obviously they surprised everyone. They ended up with the number 1 seed in the West. This year we're sitting outside the playoff picture, but all of the metrics show that we're a much better team than is played. We have reinforcements coming, and Cedric Toyert and Hartl, both from Germany, both big playmakers offensively. Do you feel like St. Louis City makes it into the playoffs this year?
Since I was pessimistic about the Blues, I'll be optimistic about them. It's one of these, like right now, when I watch St. Louis City, it is so boring. It kind of reminds, and I love soccer. I've loved it forever. I like watched World Cups when I was like 5 with my neighbor. It's weird. I have, not now, but where I grew up, above me on my street played for the LA Galaxy, Tommy Meyer, and then below me on the street played for the Colorado Rapids and DC United, John Diaramundo. So like,
oh wow,
yeah, we would watch soccer together with like their parents because they were playing and all that stuff. So I've always loved soccer, and I've loved the fact that yes, it's going to be 1-2 or 1-0 or 1-0, whatever you want to call it. Like, that's just the way soccer is. But right now, this is reminding me of like 2000, whatever the year before the Blues won the cup, where they were just so boring to where they were like dump and chase and like didn't shoot. And I know you're like, Joe, you're talking about hockey, but dump and chase, and we're always looking for that extra pass instead of shooting. That's what I'm seeing with St. Louis City right now, where they're just like they're doing a lot of what they did that had success last year in terms of long balls and in terms of certain types of counterattacks that they're not able to do now because they don't have either the defense is already they're expecting it, or the players aren't as like Klaus hasn't developed. Like Klaus isn't as good as what he was last year. Is that due to injury? Is that due to people are reading him a little bit more? I don't know. But they're just so boring. They're like masters at getting to the 21-yard mark. So 3 yards out of the 18-yard box. And instead of looking towards goal, they're like looking to where we can kick it out of bounds or where we can drop a pass to the defender. Like, or Klaus is doing he does the little turn thing and he kicks it into the 40th row of the supporter section. Like, he's so good at that maybe he should be like an NFL kicker or something and just do like a twirl and kick.
Those
Like,
fans paid good money to sit in that supporter section, and they'd like to block a ball from their face too.
well, they get to do it a lot when Klaus is down there. So it's one of those things. Like, they're very the roster isn't any better than what it was. If anything, it's worse with Pompeu being hurt. With AZL Jackson, I hated AZL Jackson though because he would get to that 21-yard mark, feel the guy on his back, and fall. Like, that's just what he did. And they refused to call it anymore because they knew it was like the Dwayne Wade move in the NBA where he'd beat the guy and he's like, but I don't have enough speed to get to the basket, so I'm just gonna stop. And they're gonna commit a foul. So that's what he was doing, and I hated seeing that. And then Thoresen, holy smokes. I had so much like excitement for Thoresen because I thought he had a good start with the club late last year. And he's just been miserable. So, like, it's one of those things you say
He
reinforcements are
looked better
coming.
last game, finally.
Yeah, finally. But, like, you say reinforcements are coming, but how long is it going to take them to mesh? Or is it going to be because everyone says, oh, well, they just hit the ground running with last season. But no, those guys were playing together for a year and a half, 2 years. So are we just going to throw these guys in here? And just because they've talked with Berkey before in their life or something, like, or because they've talked with certain players before and like shared Instagram messages, are they just going to immediately become like a meshed unit on the field or on the pitch, if you want to say it? I don't know. But since I was negative about the Blues, I'll be positive about them. And yes, they'll make the playoffs.
Here's my hot take or my thoughts on it that nobody asked for, but they're listening, so might as well put them out there. Is that I think that the transfer window is very well placed for MLS, for the secondary transfer window. And the biggest reason for that is because of the Leagues Cup. So they're going to be in the middle of the Leagues Cup break, and they can really focus on whatever the hell they want to focus on with that team. What's important to them is it Leagues Cup? Is that what's important? Okay, cool. Put your starters out there, get after it. If not, keep everyone together, bring in the new guys, work on building the chemistry. There's nobody here is going to be surprised by the fact that I say Celio Pompeu is my favorite player on the St. Louis City. He's been my favorite player when he was on City 2. I've loved him all the way. I've been begging for him to get a chance, and he got a chance this year, and he's shown what he can do, and he's really been our most dynamic playmaker in the offensive third. We've also missed Leuven for 10 games this year, with his wife, dealing with brain cancer and things, and God bless him and his wife, and hope that everything goes well. And I say, God bless, not to offend atheists, but to say that I'm hoping for the best. I do know, contrary to popular belief, I my wife and I both own Pride shirts and the Pride jerseys for the city. So we're not with Leuven when he refuses to wear Pride things. but he does care a lot. You were talking earlier about superstars. I mean, I don't know a superstar that you get more posts about him, like people running him in public and him just stopping everything to sign stuff, take pictures, and do all the things with the fans. I think Toyert becomes your new striker. I think Klaus should, and I don't know if he will, because I can also see if Celio were still healthy, there's no doubt in my mind. Klaus gets benched, Toyert becomes your striker. Hartl becomes your number 10. You still run the 4-2-3-1 with Celio on the left. You've got Hartl in the middle, Indy on the right. When Alm comes back, you get a little bit of a conundrum. If Alm gets healthy at the same time as these two guys come in, I still think you put Tuchert up top, Tuchert or Toyert, depending on, I believe it's pronounced Toyert. That's what we've been saying on the podcast, but it's spelled Tuchert. But you put Toyert up top, you put Hartl in the middle, and you put Indy on the left and Alm on the right, and that's a formidable attacking force. Yeah. And the thing that people don't realize is Alm didn't start the year with us, but he is an absolute difference maker offensively for us. The motor he does, he makes the right decision with the ball. But you pair those up with Leuven and Durkin in the back, and I think all of a sudden you're looking at a much more dangerous team that's going to potentially put the ball in the net a lot more. And then imagine Klaus coming on in the 75th minute and running at tired legs and being able to do the things he does. So I think they definitely have a chance. But, we'll see what happens. All right, I've got one last question for you, and then we'll try to wrap this thing up because it has been way too long, and I apologize for keeping you up this late. But with the Stanley Cup Finals over and Matthew Tkachuk finally winning a ring for the Tkachuk family as a player, do you see Matthew or Brady Tkachuk ever playing in St. Louis prior to their last contract where they're about to retire?
No, I do not.
I hate you.
No. No, I've had this conversation before with one of my pharmacist friends who runs the fantasy hockey league. No, I don't. I'd love to see it. Don't get me wrong, but no, I don't see it. He doesn't see it, and that dude looks at hockey more than he looks at pharmacy stuff, which is probably a bad thing, and I need to, of course, correct him. But no, it's not. I don't see it happening. But like you said, it might happen on the last year contract when we get him on the Kyle Gibson contract with the St. Louis Blues.
Hey, St. Louis is a great retirement community, apparently.
Apparently it is, even though I've been, and sorry if there's retirement communities out there listening to this,
that's our whole listening base. Don't you dare.
With the COVID vaccine clinics that I did way back when we had no idea what was going on, and we went to all these nursing homes and what's the politically correct way, the elderly homes and all that stuff. I saw some
assisted living.
I saw some.
I got you.
Miserable places. Some absolutely miserable places. So I'm sorry, Kyle Gibson, when your quad or your thigh or your lower back, whatever was tight on you, when that gets too tight, you might want to move somewhere else, because I don't know if they've got a good spot for you here in St. Louis.
Oh man, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think there's ever a way we ever land Matthew Tkachuk. I think Brady Tkachuk is a potential, but we'd have to trade for him, and everything would have to fall into the right place. So I think there's a chance. The Dumb and Dumber quote. So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yes.
So you're saying that's 1 in a million? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you're gonna be that one.
What's the chance a guy like you and a girl like me end up together? I'd say about 1 in a million. So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah.
So, I was thinking back to the Battlehawks thing, and I still think part of the reason that a lot of people went out to that championship game is, honest to God, just to prove to Stan Kroenke that we can support football and do the things that need to be done. And really, I'm always in the mood for anything that says, "Hey, Stan Kroenke, you're a piece of shit." With that, Stan Kroenke, we hate you guys, and good night.